In Orkney, we used to have an expression, "I'll be hour with the moon," meaning that I would come and visit you when the moon is full to light my way. Hello, folks, and welcome to another podcast, Hour with the Moon. And this time the moon is shining bright, as it will be when this goes out. It's not at the moment; it's broad daylight. It's a couple of days yet, but we're joined this time by a friend of mine, Dr. Selkie Gibbon, who is been friends for quite a while. I won't name dates or anything like that, because, you know, you're still, to me, you're still a very young person. But yeah, we've known each other for a very long time.
Yeah, yes.
And there is many strings to your bow. So it's not just going to be one thing, it's going to be a few things. And we'll just see what it takes us, basically.
Yep.
So, would you like to kind of introduce yourself as like what you do, who you are, and, you know,
Goodness.
what makes you tick?
I can try.
Mm.
Yeah, so I am Orcadian for Orkney, and pretty much everything I do is because I'm really proud of that and interested to ken about why Orkney's like what it is today. And so that kind of encapsulates everything I do, because over the years I've been really interested in history, in songs, and in objects. And so I kind of have maybe three major strings. I have the historic side. I love old documents and researching them. I'm also an archaeologist, so very fascinated by material culture, artefacts, objects, and that tangible elements of the past. And then a very different side of me, I suppose, is that I sing, and I've always enjoyed singing, and increasingly interested in Orkney songs and collecting those and learning about that and what they tell us about culture, because they're intangible. And I've kind of used some of the archaeology training that I've had over the years to then think about songs in a kind of different way and see them as windows into social history, our time. And it tells us too about what our forebears were thinking and what was important to them in a way that you don't get in documents.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have done the same over the years with when I've been excavating the folklore, and you kind of see elements, especially around the hearth, and you kind of go, oh, that's like, you know, there's whether there's a continuity over 5,000 years, I don't know, don't have a time machine, but it does kind of suggest that some things like the importance of the hearth was still very much at the centre of Neolithic household society, you know. So, but
what makes that interesting is that it's until relatively recently, if not still, important. And I think it's that connections that you can make between the present and the past that are particularly poignant and interesting, and who you can get other folk interested in it.
When I was digging at Stonehall at early Neolithic houses, there was, at the back of the one house, there was a pile of broken unstoneware pottery. And it was just that the recognition of the humanity, because they dropped the pot and it had broken, and they picked up the big bit and they put all the pity bits in it, you know, all the small bits get inside the big bit, as you would do to this day if you dropped a bowl and it broke. Pick it up, put the small bits in it, chuck it in the bin. They didn't have a bin, but it got chucked at the back of the house. And it was still stacked up inside the big piece. And it was just like, wow, you know, this is so human, so recognisable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I dug there too.
Yes, so you did, yes.
We were both there.
Yeah. That was a fabulous site. I loved working at Stonehall. And what a view over the Bay of Firth as well, and all that was lovely, up on the hillside.
Yep, not far from where I grew up, so it's a nice sight.
Aye. And the only trouble with it is there was a ditch ran through it, which was full of bushes, and God, the midges. Eat you alive, strip you to the bone in 5 minutes.
That was one of the excavations I did when I was a student as an archaeologist, and so I was learning to dig at that time. So I spent most of my time in the Midden, where I couldn't get up to too much bother, and had to learn how to dig there. So it's, one of the first digs I did.
The Middens are where all the good stuff comes from.
Absolutely,
you know? It's everything that's thrown away, and that's what, it's basically a career in rubbish.
Yes, that's where it started.
Yes, but great stuff. But your PhD was not in the Neolithic, though.
No, it wasn't. I think I as I was studying at university, I went to Glasgow University and I did history and archaeology joint honours, and then I did a master's following that because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And Professor Christopher Morris was the head of the department at the time, and he said to me, he says, I think you should maybe look into Norse castles in Orkney, because he knew that this had been something that had been looked at by Stora Kruston, who was an Orkney antiquarian. And it was about 100 years since it had been really looked at by anybody else. So I was really keen to do that because as I'd been studying, I had learned that I was really interested in the time when history and archaeology come together. And I think that's a lot to do with my upbringing. The sagas were always part of me story growing up. My grandmother used to read sagas to me when other folks' grannies would read fairy tales. You know, my granny read Eggle's saga to me and Eyrbygge saga. So, I had a slightly different bedtime reading than some folk did.
Psychos and spook.
Yeah. And Njal's saga as well. So, and so I was really interested in that and really interested in Orkney's past. So I did my master's, and whilst doing that, I became very aware that every time there was one of these castles or towered buildings that were appearing in North Orkney, nearby was a parish kirk or a chapel. And I was just interested as to what was going on here, what was the power structure, and increasingly interested in the kirk and thinking about, well, how did these get here and why are they here and what was the impact? And the parishes, which are such a strong part of Orkney identity, why did they get formed? When did this happen? And why do we identify so much with that, places that were the units that we live in then? And so that's what I ended up doing. And my PhD led in then to looking at its formal title, the origins and development of the parochial system in the Orkney earldom. But really, what about parishes then?
Funnily enough, the last guest that we had on here was Fran.
Okay,
and,
yes.
And I mentioned that. I said that there was this sort of, like Rogvald was sort of, why was he made a saint and such like. And the parish system was touched on, and I went, yeah, there was kind of, I remember that there was this connection, parish churches and the formation of parishes, and Fran said, I think that was Sarah Chain, and I said, I think you're right. So here we are with the person that made this connection and discovery.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things that's lesser known about Ronald. To go back to your last one, but we think about what's the legacy of Ronald, because he's not very well known as a saint, nothing in comparison to Magnus, and yet one of the things that I gave a kind of paper about at a conference about Ronald was every single day the way we live our lives is shaped by Ronald because he's responsible for the parochial system. So it's actually still underpinning a lot of how we function as people and how we inhabit space is still through Ronald. So he's had a major legacy in that respect.
No Ron, no parish cup.
Indeed. Well, there you go.
Yeah. This is football match, the parish cup, all the parishes and islands play against each other, and it's a big deal in the sporting calendar in Orkney.
It is, yeah.
So, yeah. But, so where did it all kind of begin, do you think? The whole, the development of churches?
Okay, well, I should say I'm not the first buddy to look at this. Storer Clouston, who I mentioned just a minute ago, he did so much in terms of trying to open up our understanding of Norse Orkney. He was quite keen on the sagas and Vikings. I think I can say that. And he tried a lot. But he went beyond just looking for saga people. He was looking to try and understand daily life in that time. And in that way, he was really quite ahead of his time. And he produced lots of maps as well. He did what we would kind of call landscape archaeology. But he was doing that in the very early 1900s, which you can see all his maps in the Orkney archive, and they're really just wonderful sources. So he said that there was a system of chapels in Orkney, and that they were kind of within units, parishes, that had been there for ages, Iron Age. You know, he saw them as prehistoric. And he, along with many of his contemporaries, was using the history as they knew it at that point to kind of give them a chronology. And so they had a very strict history that related to Harold Fairhair, as you probably ken. So things had to happen in relation to Harold Fairhair in the sagas. So anyway, he had this system of churches, and then he said that some of the churches were made into parish churches at some point in the Norse world. But his system of chapels was the main thing he focused on. And he believed they were sort of like taxation units as well. And so there's a term in Orkney called an Urisland, or an Ursland, or an Erisland, all the same, meaning ounce land. And he linked his chapels very much into this taxation system because he believed that had been laid down by Harold Fairhair. So he had this chronology he was working in. And so that was kind of where I was starting off. Somebody had done something a long time ago. In the intervening time, we had discovered more churches. We'd also become less certain of that chronology, and we'd freed ourselves from that chronology. So then you don't have that strict time frame. So what I thought I would do is, we don't have history books to tell us about the parish system in Orkney. You know, we have the Orkneyinga Saga, which is fantastic, but limited in what it can tell us. We don't have any papal records left to tell us anything. But we do have sites, and we have the landscape. And so I decided I would do a landscape archaeology approach to it, really. Try and figure out how many churches and chapels there are in Orkney. Where are they? And I started to look at them based on their location. What are they near? What are they far from? Who closer are they to the sea? What kind of land is it that they're built on? Are they on the edge or in the middle of settlement? And these sorts of questions. So I had a whole sort of database that produced lots of numbers, and then from that you could kind of make statements about the kinds of kirks that there were. And so it became really clear that the kirks were located within settlements. And that sounds a bit simple, I think, probably, or obvious, especially to folk that ken Orkney, because most folk will ken there's a pretty old chapel somewhere in what we would call a township. But it's not a taxation unit, it's a living place, it's a settlement. So what you find is you get a big farm, and usually next door to that there'll be a pretty private chapel. Or if you've got 2 or 3 farms or a middling size, you maybe find that there's a chapel between them, equidistant. So what you're finding is that as Christianity comes in, you can interpret this as people are building chapels for their own use in the places that they live. And nearly every chapel in Orkney has an association with a burial ground. Not all of them, but nearly everyone that's in the settlement area does. So that's telling us, well, burial was important. So these peaty kirks and their burial grounds are in the middle of a settlement. And this seems to be at the beginning of Orkney becoming Christian in the Norse world. So we need to mind on they were Christian before that. But this is the Norse world we're looking at.
Pictish times.
Yes.
But, I mean, we don't know how Christian they were.
No, we don't.
In the same way that, I mean, you know, the saga says that Harold Sigurdigri gets chomped on in Osmondswall and Soothwas, and by Olaf Tryggvason and forced to become a Christian in 995 AD. It was all very straightforward.
I know, why was I doing a PhD?
But no. but then again, you're going back to like Harold Finehair, and it's like, he did not come to Orkney. There is no evidence of this big, the saga claim of this big expedition to the west, which happened under Magnus Barelegs, but that was centuries later. So it's a lot was placed on Harold as being the guy that invented the Norse world in Orkney, but it's not really the case.
No, it's no. I think the saga's interesting in many ways by what we can read between the lines rather than what is on the lines themselves. And that 995 date, of course, it sits within a wider Norse context of Christianisation with Iceland as well. And what it's telling us, I guess, is that for the folk that are listening to the saga, that seems a comfortable time for them to think this is when Christianity was sanctioned. And I think that's important. This story it's whether it's, I'm going to take you down with fire and lime if you don't agree. It's the point that the king and the earl are agreeing that Christianity is the religion at that time. And that sits with the archaeology. So we can, some of our earliest chapel sites, then Brochadernus, which you'll ken well, and Kebbister in Shetland, these both have timber chapels that then have a later stone chapel on top of them, and they're the earliest ones that we have in the Northern Isles, and they are from the 10th century, but that is by far the earliest. So we're not needing to look back further than that, but I think it's interesting that the saga's everything sits in with the end of the 10th century being a point where Christianity is something that's happening here. But this is very much on a top level in some way. So the saga tells us, the Earl is Christian, whether he wants to be or not, but it's that sense that they are becoming Christian. And
he buggers off to Ireland with his
He does.
Magic Raven banner and gets done.
Exactly,
in.
So we can...
He's either completely rejected it or he's hedging his bets,
Yeah, which we see in those Thor's hammers that are also crosses. So again, it's a Scandinavian thing we can see happening as they shift religion, I guess. But Thorfinn the Mighty's our guy really for Orkney in terms of a bit more information about the kirk. It's said that he's the one that erects the first permanent bishop's seat in Orkney, and that's about circa 1050 if we believe were the dates, and he does this at Bushey, and of course we have amazing archaeology both on the Broch of Bushey and round the Bay of Bushey that sits within that time frame and is telling us that there's really important churches of about that date, both on the Broch and in Bushey. So there's something, really significant going on in terms of religion here and wider settlement and everything in Bushey.
Well, controversial question, but it's coming.
I do.
Where do you think that his Christkirk was built? Is it because people are arguing about being on the Broch or in the village?
Yeah. I would tend towards the village.
Me too. That seems to be the folk memory.
Exactly. That's the reason I go for it too.
Yeah.
Is if folk are calling it Christkirk, listen to them. And I think there has been in the past when people were coming to Orkney to understand the past of Orkney, they didn't always speak to folk and they didn't always record or think about looking for folk memory, much less use of place names and traditions and stories. And I think we're all the more richer in that we do use that nowadays. And there's also the archaeological evidence from the excavations around the kirk, St Magnus Kirk, in the village, that suggests something really quite ornate in the right time period for that Christkirk to have been built. And Chris Morris, in his most recent publication, his final volume of his Bushey Bay excavations, he's coming down on that same theory as well from an archaeological perspective, which is good to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's the remains of an earlier chapel underneath what is now St Magnus Kirk, which, if that was Christ Kirk, that's where Magnus was buried originally. So the replacement 17th century kirk built over it would
make perfect sense.
Absolutely. Dedicated to Magnus, because that's... Yeah. Would they have rededicated it, do you think?
Yes.
At the time of Magnus?
I think so. I think there has to be rededications going on, because Magnus and his cult is sometime after we've got most of these churches in place, or I should say the small churches. So to go backwards a peedy bit, we've got about 200, just over 200, I think 208 or 9 PD kirks in Orkney that are probably 12th century, 11th or 12th century. And that's like one every 2 townships. If you were to want a system, it doesn't really work like that. But, to give you a rough idea. And then in the 12th century, what we see is certain ones are being made into parish kirks. So they're upgraded. And Snorri Krustin saw this. He used Crosskirk in Westry as his example for that, because it's a beautiful chapel or small church that is clearly been extended. The nave was extended in probably the 12th, 13th century to accommodate parishioners. And so from that, he suggested that this was happening across Orkney. And again, that's been proven as more churches have been looked at and investigated. We can see a number of kirks where there's evidence for an enlargement in 13th or even 14th century. But where did the parishes kind of come from? And I think, they are being shaped because of the cathedral. So that's kind of what I suggested was, I don't think they're ancient. I don't think parishes are older than the 12th century. I don't think we needed them before that.
No.
We needed townships because we needed farming units, but we didn't need a bigger unit because the purpose of the parish is for administration. It's for gathering tithes. And there's no pre-parish equivalent for that, if that makes sense. Yeah, and so you've got all these churches, and the PD churches have their dedications, and they tend to then, one of them will become a parish kirk, and its dedication stays the same as far as we can. Again, all our information about dedications coming from 18th century sources mainly, maybe some a pretty bit earlier, some even later into the 19th century. So nothing pre-Reformation hardly at all. And so we have to be cautious with them. But anyway, we have our dedications, and as you say at Bushey, we've got Christ Kirk, and then it becomes St Magnus Kirk. So either they've doubled up and they've had a double dedication, which is entirely possible. In the Broch of Bushey, you've got Cumin Peter. So it's a thing that in Orkney, when you find 2 dedications, what people have tended to do in the past to say it was either one or the other. And haven't given thought to the fact it could be both. You can have 2 altars, so it can be a double dedicated church. So Christ Church, that might have happened, which is why it might still have been called Christ Church in kind of folk memory, but have a dedication to Magnus. So it could be both.
As his original burial place. I mean, that's a really, really strong connection. And all the first miracles and all being attributed to that building. Yeah.
And I think the Magnus dedications are really interesting. I've gone off-piste a bit, but...
There's no script. It's a conversation.
So one of the things that's kind of happened following on for the work I did on the kirks is that I became really interested in St Magnus, our patron saint. And so it's curious to be somebody for the outside. There's not that many Magnus dedications in Orkney. So we've got Bushey, we've got Egglesey, and we've got a very beautiful towered church in Egglesey dedicated to Magnus, and we've got the cathedral. Now in Shetland we have far more dedications to Magnus, and in Caithness we have more dedications to Magnus. So why so few in Orkney? So Barbara Crawford argued it was because Haakon, who was responsible for the death of Magnus, was situated in Orkney, and so he didn't allow these dedications to be to happen in Orkney. And in these other places, there wasn't such an influence on Hagen. I take a different look on it. I think what they're doing is they're limiting the dedications in Orkney to the places associated with the cult of St. Magnus. So Egilsey's where he died.
Mm-hmm.
So let's mark his place of death with a church dedicated to him. Bushey is where he's made a saint. It's where he's first buried, where he becomes holy. Let's mark his point of elevation with a Magnus dedication. Kirkwall and the cathedral is where he still is. It's his final place of rest. So if we want to look for the places in terms of the cult of saints, these are the three key points in Magnus's, journey to sanctity thing. So we've got place of death, place of elevation, and then his place of burial. And that means that all those sites are really powerful. And if you're a pilgrim and you come to Orkney, you can go to the three Magnus kirks that mark those points in the landscape. So I think it's a deliberate decision to limit Magnus dedications rather than somebody saying, no, you're not allowed to. Mm-hmm. I think it's almost the opposite. It's like, this is where I guess it's not the opposite in some ways, but it's a different reason for it. Yeah. It's the power of the bishopric and the earldom and saying, right, this is where we want these points to be.
When you think about it, though, I mean, Earl Paul, Hakon's son, was obviously hostile towards the cult of St. Magnus because it's like, my dad murdered a saint. I mean, it's in a Christian community, it's not a good look, But when you think about the time that that Paul was kidnapped and then subsequently murdered, which is around sort of 1136, you're looking at 20 years after Magnus was killed. So, that's a very, very short period of time. You would think that then the cult would expand and that's when you would get the dedications.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. I had never thought of that.
Yeah, because if you've got places that are already... They already have dedications. So Christchurch is already Christchurch. I would argue that Egilsey is probably... if not that church, but a church on that site or near there was dedicated to Mary. There's a How Mary, just right near the kirk. And usually when we get that Marian in any form, it does relate to a church dedication. And it's the most common dedication in Orkney. So to have a Marian church in Egilsey would be perfectly believable. And then Magnus and the cult of Magnus, and then it becomes a Magnus kirk. And of course the cathedral, new building, it's not dedicated to Olaf, is it? No, it's dedicated to Magnus. So I think you're stamping that cult of Magnus into the landscape and into Orkney. It's in St. Olaf's parish, but it's dedicated to Magnus. So it's that lovely nod, I think, and you're replacing in a way, or not replacing, you're sitting with St. Olaf's kirk, where Magnus would have been temporarily located until the cathedral was built, but the kirk is dedicated to him.
Yeah, it's fascinating when you start pulling all these sort of threads together. And the fact that the cathedral, still exists. And Fran was pointing out in our last conversation that as far as she knows, it's the only church that has got the bones of its patron saint still in Scotland. Because normally they were chucked out in the Reformation. So it's quite amazing.
It's incredible. We have a date of foundation. We have the building still standing, and it's in a condition that we can actually read the building and understand its development, its growth, how it was built, how it was used, all just from being in that building. And then the fact that Magnus is still in there, and Ronald, I think it's we're very fortunate to have that level of existence still there, and yet then there's things we ken so little about. And I think that the cathedral, when I speak about the kirks in Orkney, the medieval kirks, the cathedral's the one that I always give as the best evidence we have. You can't get better than that. We've got a written source, we've got the building, we've got archaeological evidence dating everything for that particular building, and then you've got on the other end there's a dedication or a church that was dedicated to St. Salvador in Shapinsea. And the only evidence we have is that David Balfour donated some implements from some Picts houses that were next to St. Salvador's chapel in Shapinsea. And we have nothing else. So nobody knows where that was. Nobody knows which Pict house it was, because there were plenty. So that is the only evidence we have for that kirk ever being in existence. And so that's the other end of the scale. And the information we have about all of the PD churches and the parish churches in Orkney varies between that two, and errs more towards the St. Salvador end mostly, in terms of what we can about them.
I suppose the cathedral on a much bigger scale is following that example that you were saying about extensions to churches, because of course it is extended in the early 1200s, and must have been completed by 1263 anyway, because that's when King Haakon IV dies in the bishop's palace and is temporarily buried in front of the altar of St. Magnus, it says in the saga. So that's been extended. Would that be because the cult was actually kind of thriving and there was a lot of pilgrims turning up?
That's certainly what the accepted sort of interpretation is. I don't know, as I say, that time machine. But it makes sense for that to be the case. And certainly they're extending the East End. And one of the arguments is that it's to allow for a better perambulation around the altar, and also minding on that we've got Ronald too, so we now have two saints in the cathedral, whereas when it's first built we just have the one. So you need space for adding Ronald in as well, and particularly at that time, because if the extension, I think it's pretty certain that Bishop Bjarni Kolbingsson was responsible for that extension, that time of building, and he is also the person who is promoting Ronald to be a saint. So you can see why under his bishopric he's saying, okay, we need more room for our second saint, and also it just all sort of fits in. Lots of cathedrals across Europe get this extension in the 13th century. And they also get a rose window. So what's happening in Orkney is not in isolation. It's actually very much happening at the same time, if not, afore. It's happening in other places.
Yeah. And some of the finest carvings as well as in that end.
Absolutely.
Including a Shiel the Gig, which is the most northerly one that I know of. I don't know if you have.
I don't know of any further north. I don't know.
A Shiel the Gig is a kind of a rude lady.
A rude lady, yes.
Free-spirited as Ronald, which was probably an old fertility symbol, and that was kind of incorporated into churches, but in Ireland incorporated into secular buildings, castles and mills and such like. I bumped into Mick Aston on Broad Street once, late lamented, because he's such a lovely guy, leader of Time Team.
Yeah.
And I met him on the street, and he remembered me. He remembered my name.
From Minehouse?
From and Sandy before as well. So, but I mean, I was amazed at the thousands of folk that he must have met during excavations. But anyway, I was just chatting to him and his wife on Broad Street, and I mentioned, I says, do you know that, as you do, drop in the conversation, do you know the cathedral's got a Shiel the Gig? And he went, no. And I went, yeah, and he goes, show me. So off we went, and I pointed it out. It's amazing carvings around that East End, and I love the little hooded figure as well, which is referred to as a pixie, because it's just a medieval guy with a hood on.
With a hood on, yeah.
It's the old dead. But you're saying about the parish churches being extended to take in parishioners, because originally that would have been a private chapel for a family.
Yes, I think so. Over the years, you'll notice I'm speaking about PD churches. I should say PD as in small churches. When I started doing my research, I called them chapels, because when we learn about them first, they're nearly always called chapels. It tends to be antiquarian accounts that say about them. It tends to be Presbyterian ministers that are saying things about them, generally not particularly positive, because they are shouldn't be there still.
Catholic.
Yes. So, and they call them chapels, but there's a kind of connotation with what a chapel is. So I've made it more neutral by calling them small churches, because we actually don't really know their function. But from the proximity of many of them to the head farm in that area, we can say that what we're seeing is very similar on the ground to a manorial estate with its own chapel. So it's for the folk in that area, but they're dependents as well. So it's not just for the head of the house, but it's the family and their dependents. And we see it in Orkneyinga Saga. If you think about some of the stories, my most favourite story is in Orfar, where you've got Svein, when Svein Asleeperson kills Svein Breastrop, and you never mind that. What I'm interested in is the fact that they're moving back and forth between their feasting hall and their church, and you get that sense of culture at the time. So you feast and you pray, and you need to be near enough. Your church needs to be near enough your hall so that it's convenient to do both. And so it's not just earls who have halls, and it's not just earls who feast, and it's not just earls who pray. So you're getting it at different levels of society, but doing the same thing. So they're kind of, I don't like kind of the term manorial, because it suggests where Orkney farms are manors, and they're no. But they're the sort of private churches for the farms in the area, or for the townships or communities. And for that reason, I think you can see some of that development for the bottom up, as well as from the top down, which is normally who you would see Christianity coming into a place. So that's kind of what I see their purpose, but not all of them. And I think when I was looking at the locations, I said to you, most of them were in settlements. Some of them aren't. Some of them are absolutely not in settlement areas. And Orkney's landscape, Orkney's a small archipelago. Wherever there's good land, folk live on it and they farm it. Wherever there's good access to the sea and fishing grounds, they're biding near there too. So in the places where folk don't bide, they're quite obvious, and occasionally we get kirks away up on the top of a hill, or away in a moorland, one in Woodwick in Avey, for instance, and then there's ones up the Burn in Avey. So they're doing something different. On a very basic level, the one that's right next to your house is doing something very different from these PD ones up in far remote places, and they don't tend to have burial grounds associated. So these are just PD kirks on their own, isolated. And then we have other ones that might be in a township area, but clearly separated from the settlement. And these are the ones that are on peninsulas in lochs, most often, or islands in lochs. Right. And a good example there would be in Rousey, in the area called Waster. And you've got a chapel site on a peninsula called Breetonus. So it might be dedicated to Bridget, we don't know. And then there's an island that's partly artificial, and it's a St. Peter's Kirk on that one. And it's the only place we found medieval glass in Orkney that I know of came from that site, which is quite an interesting, just a side comment. But so we're getting these ones. Well, they're doing something different again. They're in watery places, and I just called them watery sites because I can't tell you about their chronology because they've not been dated. I can't tell you about their function because they've not been excavated. All I can tell you is that there is this group, and there's about 14 of them, that are all in watery places, and that's not the same as the ones that are next to farms. So we've got different things going on. They're not all doing the same thing. So most of them would be that kind of private chapel, but other ones are doing something else.
And then being extended to take in people from all the township or from other areas as well.
So I think when you're getting to your parish system, so Orkney's parishes are quite unique in that they're all units within themselves. So that most other parishes in other places, they have a kind of core, and then they'll have satellites in other places. If thinking particularly in England, but also in Scotland, you get this. And that's because they're based on earlier estates that have got land in different places. So the evolution comes up through, and you can see it in the structure. Orkney's parishes don't do that. They're all units within themselves. So what does that tell you? They're not based on earlier estates, perhaps. And then you look at the parish kirks, and nearly all of them are either on land that belonged to the earldom or the bishopric by the time we get our first rentals, the rental evidence in the, 1495, 1500. So that's telling us that either the earl or the bishop owned the land on which the parish kirk is built, which makes sense when it's the earl and the bishop that's deciding to build St Magnus Cathedral, and it needs a parochial system to finance it, to run it, to administer it. So the most important person in an area has their piddy kirk upgraded to a parish kirk. It then becomes the place where the centre, then it becomes the centre of that area. And then it's kind of divided around it. So the townships form the parishes. But the kirk is very rarely, in fact, in the middle of a parish. So a good example of how far for the middle they can be is in the parish of St Andrews.
Where I was born.
Where you were born, yes. And so the parish kirk is away out at one end of it, but it's at the Halatankernes, which was the seat of the most important person in that area in the 12th century when the kirks were being made into parish kirks. And you can use Orkneyinga Saga at this point, I think, reasonably with certainty, or as much certainty as we like to give them, because it's 12th century, we've got lots of people mentioned in Orkneyinga Saga and where they're living. And think about how many folk have a parish kirk next to them. It's not mentioned in the saga, but if you think about Sigurd of Westness, where's the parish kirk in Rousey? Yeah. It's at Westness, So you can see this, the Halatankernes. We've got Erlinger. There he is, Halatankernes. And we can see that time and again where these people are mentioned, that you get this pairing of important person. And many of these important people are tenants of the earl. And we have to mind that when they're not free farmers. It's earldom land that they are gifted or in charge of. So that's what you're seeing. And that's why I think the parish is, because I often wondered, why is the parish kirk in a funny, not in the middle? And that helps explain it. And it's also giving you a moment in time. You can actually see at this point when the parishes are designated, this is where the most important body lived in this area. And often the name of the parish takes its name either from the kirk that becomes the parish kirk, or is the parish kirk, or the township that parish kirk's in. So if we go to the West Mainland and we think on Sandwick, parish kirk in Sandwick, St Peter's, is in the area known as Sandwick, and then it gives its name to the whole parish. And then if you go to Westry, you've got Crosskirk. Well, that's the name of the parish originally, and that's the name of the parish kirk. And then you've got Ladykirk at the village side of Westry, and that gives its name to that parish. So if the parishes are far older, why are their names the dedications of churches?
Because when you had that in Sandy, Cross and Lady as well, but also St Combs, which is now known as Burness.
Burness, that's right.
But originally it was a church. Like 3 parishes the island is all named after the church.
Yeah. So if there was already pre-existing units from prehistory, you would think there would be something would have happened that had a name. Because would you have a unit without a name? And then it gets you all thinking about why do we call things, it's the name and the unit and how they link up, And that's why I don't think you need them beforehand.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have to take a moment now and think about names and spaces. It's a really interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, it's a lot to get your head around. But it does make sense.
Yeah.
Because why else would you have these basically artificial divides between one area and another, which all have their own name and their own identity? And they're all own tea names as well, nicknames that went to the parishes,
And moreover, there's an example in Avey, in West Mainland, and Rendell. So where the parish boundary runs there's a firm called Midland or Midgarth. Can't mind on one or the other, but it's mid, and it's not mid. It's on the edge now. So again, it's suggesting to you at the time that was named, it's the middle part of a bigger unit that then later gets divided by the parish. So we can see that. You see it in Derness too, where you've got Upper Sandy and Sandy on either side of Dingishowie. And then the parish, Derness is it's the only one I've found where the parish boundaries actually shifted. in time. So the parish boundary originally for Derness and St Andrews was into St Andrews. It was kind of on the border with Fubister, the area of Fubister, and then it moves over and becomes kind of midway through Dingishowie.
On the peninsula.
Yeah, on the peninsula.
That spit, sand.
That naturally divides it. Yeah. But of course, that's a more modern way of thinking, that spit divides Derness from St Andrews, because of course it's a beautiful sandy bay and it's a landing place and it's a ting site. Goodness me, it's lots of things that shouldn't be divided earlier on. But yeah, so you can use place names around to try and kind of get underneath the parish system as well, and then start to kind of figure out what's going on.
I feel quite justified because I've written this book called Tales in the Landscape, which is just stories from all over the Orkney mainland using the different parishes. And I knew that Dingishowie technically is part of Tob. Tob and Tankinus being the two units that form the parish of St Andrews. But it's the story with the fiddler going in there and playing a lot of heave tambichens for Derness. And so I thought, this is all Derness. So I thought, well, we'll cheat a bit and we'll put that in with the Derness things. But for what you're saying
originally.
Wow. A happy accident.
Yeah.
Always like it.
I mean, there was lots more that I get through to try and look at the parishes. It's a whole, there's no one piece of evidence. You really have to pull together a whole lot of different things. And I mean, looking at maps as well, when you start to look at the lines of the parishes and you realise that the lines often are arbitrary because they're gone through hillgrund or uninhabited lands. And so the core of the parish, and it was something I toyed with a lot, and I'm still no got the right solution to it, is who do you map these things? Because I didn't want edges to me parishes, because I don't think edges were important. It was the core that's important. It's where folk are biding and what kirk you pay your tithes to and what kirk you go to get married in and where you're buried. This is what's important. No, the limit, the ground. And quite often the limits are shared. So by drawing a line on a map to show a parish, you're actually artificially bracking up the parts that were shared. Do you know what? Does that make sense? And then the part that is linked to a parish doesn't get its kind of significance. I was tried different things with shading, and if you could sort of fade out in different colours, but it gets very messy where you've got like Sandy, where you've got three coming together and such like. But that idea that where folk are biding, it's the townships that make the parish, and it's the folk that make the parish. And then of course there's a taxation system applied to it, and I come back to the Ounslands and Storer's Ounslands and his churches. So I removed them from each other, and I say, right, the churches are based on where folk are biding and the units in which they live and work. The taxation system has to come in. It does come in, but it comes in later. Comes in when we start to see a different shift in society, where people go to basing their wealth on land. And I think that's also 12th century. It sits more comfortably in the 12th century. Yeah. And it's at the same time as you start seeing castles appearing and towers appearing and things that say, here I am in this landscape, look at me, this is my home. Am I not powerful with my big tower?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you know, and that's the statement, isn't it? It's my land. Yeah. And that's new. Before that, you've got your feasting hall and it's, here's my wealth. Here's this beautiful brooch. Here's this jewellery. Here's this wealth. Here's my, everything's personal. And then you get that shift in society and a shift in architecture that starts to make bold statements about land and territory.
Because the one thing that's been pointed out as well in the past with Orkneyinga Saga is you have the that dispute between Thorbjorn Clerk and Thorin Bagnose, where Bagnose gets done in a tavern in Kirkwall, in an inn, which I did hear once. I don't know if it's right or not. That was the first reference in British literature to a pub.
Okay.
But it showed us a change in society, because instead of going to the chieftain or the jarl and going to his drinking hall, because you're one of his men, one of the boys, and drinking at his expense, you then have your own disposable income. You can go to a pub and buy your own beer. You don't have to have it given to you by somebody that you're dependent on.
Yeah.
So it kind of shows a more independent side of society.
Yeah, and I think these are pretty glimpses of the society that the saga's not really meant to tell you about. It's not designed to tell you about, because it is focusing on particular families that are biding in Orkney and their relations to earls and such like. But yes, and that, I mean, again, it comes back to St Magnus, I think, a big part of that, because you've got the growth of the Tuna Kirkwall. And again, that's unusual for the Scandinavian world, really, and particularly for the diaspora. Here we are in Orkney with a town, a medieval town, albeit small to begin with, but it's growing. And in that, you've got taverns, you've got merchants, you've got pilgrims. And some of the questions I can't answer is, where are these pilgrims biding? You know, and this is some of the work I've been doing on Magnus of late, is thinking about, you know, who was coming to Orkney to venerate Magnus, and who did they get here, and using some of the information we have to help us understand that a bit better. In its most simple form, there's a beautiful double footprint stone in Burrock, which is right down at the south of South Ronaldsay in Ladykirk in Burrock, and it's called the Ladykirk stone or the Magnus stone. And of course, it has this brilliant tradition, several of them, but mainly Magnus uses it to transport himself across the Pentland Firth because he needs to get to Orkney, and it's his petrified footprints that are on the stone. But this is the journey pilgrims would make. If you're coming through Scotland and you're coming to Orkney and you want to go St Magnus Cathedral, you cross about Hanswick-Canisby or thereabouts, and you come across to Burrock. And then you go and you say, thanks to God for my safe journey. And you go into a kirk where there's a stone of St Magnus. You know, suddenly this is like, this is a connection with Magnus at the point where you give thanks for your safe passage. And that kind of gives an explanation for why it's there. Because if you chart all the sort of stories and information that we have to do with St Magnus, it very clearly sits within the journeys between those churches we spoke about. So for Egglesey, round to Avey, Bursey, round the West Mainland and into Kirkwall, there's very little anywhere else. But Burrock has this, is an outlier in some ways, but it's not at all. It's the beginning. It's the entranceway into St Magnus's Orkney. So things like that, I think, fascinating. But I still can't tell you where they stayed when they got to Kirkwall. But Fran says that, and I think she knows that some pilgrims used to sleep within churches, so whether they actually slept in the upper floors of the church, perhaps. But we don't have a hospital name in Kirkwall. No. And we should, really. If we were thinking about it other places. We're hospital, we're spittle name is in Evie, opposite Einhallow. So it's a different hospital. But so that's some of the things I've been looking at, and it links to your 13th century extension as well. We come back to that because I think one of the things I noticed during my PhD when I was going to visit all the parish kirks, and I'm really annoyed that I noticed it kind of halfway through my PhD site visits, was there was bits of red sandstone in lots of parish kirks. And I was like, well, there's another bit of red sandstone. And then I go to site and like, there's a bit of red sandstone. Why is there chunks of red sandstone in the kirkyard walls or built in or lying about in parish kirkyards? And it's not from that area. So this red sandstone is very specifically identifiable because it looks like the stone in St Magnus Cathedral. And so at the end of my PhD, I kind of said, well, I've noticed this, too late to do a proper record of it for everywhere. But it suggested to me that there was a connection between the cathedral and the parish kirks, that they were being connected through stone. And I kind of left it there and then mulled over it for about 20 years. And then the more I've thought about pilgrimage and looked into that, I think you can take it further than that, that if you've got a cathedral with an apsidal end, okay, you're going to go with me on this, and you've got a shrine in that apsidal end. So any of the stone that was near that shrine is what we would call a third-class relic. By association. If, as I believe is the case also, that Magnus's bones were actually interred in the cathedral earlier than the Reformation, the whole building becomes a relic because all the stone is imbued with Magnus, you know. So if you're then going to extend your cathedral, you need more room. It's changing fashion. We've got a different structure organising the cathedral. We're going to Augustinian canons. So we need this new shape. what do we do with this stone that has relic? You know, it's got saintly properties. Do we give it to the parish kirks at the time that they're being extended? Do they build it into their altars? Do they build it into the fabric of their buildings so that they connect to St Magnus? Is it a relic of St Magnus that goes to every kirk? It's just a suggestion, but it gives you an explanation why these pieces of red sandstone are turning up in all these parish kirks and actually in some of the smaller chapels, which is also interesting. And it sits within the time frame that the parish kirks are being extended and the cathedral's being extended. So I just wonder if they're connected.
Well, I know that there's red sandstone out in Einhallow.
Oh, yes.
And the kirk underneath St Magnus Kirk in Bursey, you know, that's Christ Kirk or whatever, that's got this chunk of red sandstone and it decorates the stone that's in there. Do you think that I heard once that thought maybe the red sandstone was used to decorate that church later, and we got remodeled in the 12th century?
Yeah, so there's a few times that you'll read this placement of red sandstone being later. And I'm not sure, sometimes I guess if we go back to Einhallow, one of the arguments with Einhallow was that there's a collection of red sandstone there. So, and it is just lying around the church. And there's also more of that at the site of Scale, at Westness, across the water in Rousey, in the kirk there, and there's pieces built into the kirk. Again, it's a post-Reformation kirk, so we're not too near the medieval period. And the suggestion was that this was all quite recently brought to these places for follies and such like, you know, in the time of maybe Burrows or a bit before that. And I would argue that's not the case for Rousey now, and I'll tell you why. Because we've been excavating for the past 11 years at Scale Farm, right next to the kirkyard, and we are finding bits of red sandstone as we go down through the occupation layers at Scale, and they are earlier than the time of Burrows by several centuries. So no, we've got and last year the discovery of a beautiful red sandstone carved head that came out from some of the earlier occupation layers. This is a historic building that we're still in, so we're looking maybe 13th, 14th century, but it could be a bit later. We're not got all the dates for this yet because we're still excavating. But certainly pre-Reformation layers that we're in, and this beautiful carved head, red sandstone, in a farmhouse context. So all of that tells me that this happened earlier. It's not later, and it's not for kind of folly type. And the amount that's in Rousey, for instance, we're getting more and more and more. There's so much that I'm really leaning towards the fact there was a kirk that was substantially red there, a pre-Reformation kirk, and we opened up excavation at the site called the Work, which is just nearby in Rousey, and we got to open up some trenches that Storer Clouston had dug originally, and we had absolutely no small finds in the small excavations apart from lots of red sandstone, and it's moulding for like window tracery, and it's 13th century, and you know, I just think it's from a window frame in a church that was in Rousey at the time, because we've just got so much material, and it's again being aware of the importance of that place. You know, Rousey's really significant, so's Einhallow. These are really important places. So having pieces of red sandstone, having really ornate buildings that are emulating the cathedral in some way would be understandable.
Yeah, and Sigurd of Westness was, of course, related to Earl Paul and all that. So, I mean,
absolutely.
If you're wanting to show your loyalty to the new guard, you know.
Exactly. And then Einhallow as well, the more recent surveys that were done there, they were suggesting that it was perhaps the tower was a sort of pilgrimage tower. It had relics in it. And as well as the red sandstone that's lying around on the site, one of the archways has got red sandstone at the basis of the arch, suggesting again it's earlier than that later date. But when I'm saying earlier, I'm thinking 13th century, sort of 12th, 13th century, because a lot of these pieces we can date more comfortably to the 13th century, to that exact time when you were saying, Bishop Bryarney's time, when these really beautiful elements are coming into the cathedral. So I think there's a story there that we don't fully understand, but I do think red sandstone is being moved around, and then by extension, I've got a student, Jenny Murray, who's the museum curator from Shetland.
No, Jenny.
So she's just finished her PhD on looking at red sandstone and St Magnus, and particularly in Shetland, where there was towered churches built of red sandstone that came from Orkney in Shetland. So when you realise they're moving that amount of red from Orkney to Shetland to build a towered church, then moving smaller amounts to your parish kirks in Orkney makes, again, a deal of sense.
I was about 30 years ago, I was on a bus tour with Paul Newman, not the...
No, I know who you mean.
not the salad dressing Paul Newman. but
the vernacular architecture Paul Newman.
Exactly, from Edinburgh University. And we went out to Langalore in Firth, which is a beautiful old longhouse with the nuke beds built into the wall. And there's this fabulous story there, which Ian Scott told me, Ian O'Redland. Tell me the story about, the baby that was born drunk there.
Yes, I've heard you tell this story.
I absolutely just love it. It's a great favourite. But when we were in there, because he was telling me, he was pointing out, there's been this, the Sabink here, that's where the baby's body was put and all that, and found out it was alive, but it was drunk. But then he went down to the gable end in the main building. And he pointed out a piece of red sandstone in it, which he said came from a medieval chapel that was in the field below where Langalore was. Oh. And it had been built into the house, into the building, which would date, I don't know, when it would be 1600s, something like that maybe. But what he had done was he'd removed a few bits of stone around it to make it more obvious. Because he was so proud of that building.
Yeah.
And so I hope it stands for a lot longer.
That's a really interesting site, Redland, there. And there's a chapel. There's the field kind of in front of the house there is supposed to be, I think, where the chapel was. But I think there's been other bits and pieces found there over the years, kind of artefacts too. So it's really interesting. I didn't realise about the red piece in the house. So
it was pointed out to me by Ian, but I mean, that was like, 30 odd years ago. Yeah. But I mean, it'll still be there. Yeah. If the house hasn't been demolished, then it'll still be there.
And it's interesting, like, going beyond the Magnus connections or any of that when you start to become obsessed with something like red sandstone, you start to see it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I can't go anywhere now without kind of looking for red sandstone. And we were in Rousey just having a walk, and I'd noticed that it's nothing to do with Magnus, but there was like pieces of a broken, maybe knocking stone that had been built into a wall, and you can see who folk are using the red, ornamentally, perhaps, or for other reasons into buildings. So there's more than just red happening because of churches, but it's like when we start to think about why folk pick a certain thing to build in and to keep, and why other things are thrown away. It's really interesting, and that red sandstone, for lots of reasons, probably gets kept and reused. And,
but I mean, a Catholic symbol of martyrdom.
Well, yes,
so I mean, it's the blood of the martyr. But although he wasn't really, when we had this conversation with Fran, I mean, he wasn't really martyred. I mean, he didn't die for his faith.
No, but he died for his people. Well,
so it says later.
So it says later, yeah. That's what he's known for in terms of a saint. So his colour is because of his hagiography, isn't it? They pick out the elements in the hagiography.
Because of his violent death.
Yes, exactly. So it's a violent death, and he's one of those warrior saints. Really. And it's very interesting, that transition, isn't it? Because I see him as a warrior saint, just like St. Olaf and some of the other saints, Scandinavian saints. And he sits very comfortably in that milieu with me, but then he's almost rebranded later on then, and he becomes a saint of peace. And it's quite interesting how he can be both of those things, and they're so very different, and yet he's almost able to do that.
Yeah. There's, I mean, the medieval altarpieces from Norway depict him in wearing armour. I mean,
yes, that's
not something that would have been worn in the 12th century, but it's sort of medieval armour, and But he's incredibly effeminate looking.
Yes.
You know, he's sort of like this little kind of girly face with pink cheeks and blonde hair. You know,
think about those curls. You know, he's got really those lovely like sort of ringlets almost in his hair. Well, going back to our little man from Scale, his hair's really wavy as well. It was one of the first things that struck me. And of course, when you see something, when you're looking for it, you find it. But you know, here is this little head of somebody that's sort of quite serene, almost smiling, eyes are closed, and then there's this very beautifully kind of sculpted wavy locks, which is very interesting because you don't, as you say, it's quite notable, these wavy locks, long wavy locks on a sculpture. So I'm saying nothing more than that. But it's very interesting that there's that. You can, when you've seen images of Magnus, you know, those exact ones that you say from Norway and Iceland, and then the pity head, and I was like, oh, got similar hair. That's all, you know, maybe.
Well, that carving, which I know was a bit later, that came from St Magnus Cathedral, it's now an Orkney museum, depicting Magnus with a sword. Yep. Which people always said, oh, it's similar as martyrdom, innit? You know, and you go, well, you know, like you said, warrior saint. But he's got a ducal garland.
That's right, yeah.
His head. But his hair turns up.
Turns
at the
up,
ends.
yeah, exactly. It's very interesting. It seems to be it's a feature that's recurring in images of Magnus. Yeah.
The red sandstone sculpture from that was found down at Westness, which is in the Orkney Museum. You know, it was thought to. It's like a conical.
Oh yes, the pinnacle head type thing. Yes,
with the faces on.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, would that been part of this church?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, yes, it's incredible the things that are coming from there, and I think what makes it extra interesting for me is that you don't get an absolute equal in the cathedral. It's in the same style, but it's doing something slightly different. So this these fragments, or this pinnacle, I think they kind of would call it a pinnacle, and it's covered in 36 little carved heads. And Stora Christian found it when he was digging at the work.
Right.
So it was upturned inside this medieval tower. So he took it out, and there's a kind of fascinating story about this, because it's in this one part of it, and it's clearly one part of something that has more parts. So kind of, we would say it's the middle section. Yeah. And that went to the museum, and it's in the medieval gallery, and it's been there for ages. And long ago, when I was just back from studying, I spent a lot of time volunteering at the museum under Anne Brundle. She gave me I came in once a week, and as you'll remember, I was volunteering there and tidying up the store with Anne. And there was a lot of time that I was sitting writing notes and such like. And so there was a knocking stone in the corner of Anne's office in the store, and it had a bit of plywood on the top of it, and I would just sit on that and mark me notes, because often there was, you know, nowhere else to sit. So I sat down on this, and I mean, I would have done this for a long time. And we were in there, Jenny and I were in there as part of her PhD just a couple of years ago, and we were looking at it with interest, because it's big, it's very dark. And then Jenny says, "Is that a head?" And I said, "What?" And do you know, it's upside down. Yeah. So it looks like a knocking stone. It's got a big hole out of it, but it's in fact upside down. And if you turn it the right way up, it's got human heads all around it. It is octagonal, which is the same as the piece upstairs. And we think it's the base section of the part that's upstairs.
Brilliant.
But this piece, there's no record of how it came into the museum.
No.
You know, it's one of these pieces that's arrived in a long time ago, and there's no record for it. So I wonder if it came from Stora, maybe, or at a different time. But because a number of things from that sort of early 1900s or so, there's not very good provenance for them coming into the museum, is there?
Well, the thing is, the Orkney Antiquarian Society started their own museum. Now, they were founded in 1922. Yeah. And they ran up until 1939, when it ended with World War II. And that formed the core of the museum's collection. Now, the museum didn't open until 1968.
Yeah. And Storer, of course, was involved in the Orkney Antiquarian Society.
Oh, very, very much
and
so.
The excavations at the work were, I think, about 1929. So it's right at the time where maybe pieces were going into that collection.
Yeah.
So it's just really fascinating to think that I was sitting on this, and I never noticed that there were human heads carved on it. You know,
I always noticed the carving on it,
Did you?
I thought that they were just like decorative bosses.
Yes,
you know,
looked
I didn't
like
see them as
shields or something.
Yeah, I didn't see them as being heat.
No, if you turn it
They were
upside down, yeah. And then when we were digging at scale, we were clearing out a passageway between two parallel sets of buildings, and in the rubble infill was this capital, red sandstone, very like the 13th century capitals, but it's octagonal.
So it's at the top of it.
It's at the top. We don't know yet. We've not managed to get them all together, but it just, if it were, that would then be telling us that that whole pinnacle must have been in Rousey pre-Reformation. So, you know, it's things like that we're building together all the time to try and understand it. But again, it's that, you know, heads in Rousey seems to be the thing, because there's nothing like that pinnacle heads in the cathedral.
Yeah.
And there's nothing exactly like the Peary head that was found last year either.
Well, there was something that was kind of similar on a window. I've seen on Facebook.
So
the font of all knowledge.
Yes. Well, when I wasn't on site the day that they found it. I was in the town, and they messaged me straight away, because anytime something red comes, I get a message on my phone. So they said, "Look," and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And I was actually standing just outside the cathedral at the time. So I get in the cathedral and spent 2 hours wandering around the cathedral with this picture on my phone, thinking, what's nearest in image, you know, what's most similar. But I didn't have the sizes as easy to find, you know, to locate. And but I saw these ones, and it's on the south aisle or the nave, and it's the same time period. It's the one window that was a doorway. And then they blocked it up and made it into a window when they redesigned the cathedral. It's the interpretation was that originally they were going to have cloisters, and that would have been the door out. But then when they changed it and made it into sort of an Augustinian canon run and extended the east end, that was changed. So they blocked that up and they made it into a window. And then the window frame comes down and it moves inward on both corners, and on each side there is a Peary carved head. And from the ground they look like they were yellow sandstone or the white sandstone. But Fran very kindly got scaffolding put up for us after the summer, and we went up, and it's actually been like whitewashed, you know, like a lot of the stone is in the cathedral, and it's red sandstone, but they're carved into the blocks at the bottom of the window, so it's not a freestanding head, but it is very similar. I think it must have been carved by the same buddy or somebody who had been taught the same way. The style, the eyes are very similar, the nose, and then on the other side of the window there's one it's not the same quality. So it's quite interesting. You've got the 2 heads, and it's much more worn, and I don't think it would ever have been the same kind of quality and detail as the one. But that's as close, but it's bigger. It's much bigger than our small head that we've got. But I don't know what the head could have been. This is the thing. It's
Could it have been part of the 12th century cathedral that was demolished to extend?
I just don't know. No, I think it's too late. Its style is more 13th century, so it's more like the one in that window, which is 13th century. So it's not the earliest part, but it doesn't look like it's had, you know, it doesn't look like it's decapitated. It looks like it's intentionally just a head, and the back of the head is not detailed. So it looks like it's been the front and the sort of sides that were meant to be seen. Yeah. So, but I've not yet been able to spend a lot of time on it, but I've not found anything to explain what its purpose maybe was and where it was meant to be.
I found a beautiful carved red sandstone leaf from the cathedral on the stone pile in front of the stonemasons, workshop. And it's when Colin Watson was the stonemason. And I went, holy shit, look at that, you know, wow. And he went, oh yeah, right. And I said, you shouldn't have that lying around there, because anybody could nick it, thinking, I'm going to nick this. So he said, "Oh well, you can tuck it away where you," he says, "but put it to the museum." The little fella sitting on my right shoulder was going, "Yes, Thomas, put it to the museum and be a good boy." The one on the left shoulder was going, "Nah, tear off, stay on the man. Look great on the mantelpiece, you know." But being a responsible museum person, I took it to the museum. But it did sit on a mantelpiece in the museum, in an office for quite a lot of years. But it ended up in the medieval gallery. Okay. And it's a beautiful little thing. But the carved heads now aren't in the medieval gallery. That got remodeled about, I don't know, it was quite a few years ago. And it was on a little pinnacle itself, on a little pillar, so you could look up at it. And that was, I think it's in store now, but kind of should be back up there. But if all these bits went together...
If they all go together, that would be amazing. Yeah. I think it would need to be on the bottom story of the museum. By the weight of it.
Well, yeah, but we do have part of Bishop Tulloch's tomb.
You do, I know, well, it just might be the final straw. I would hate to be responsible for that. Yeah. But yeah, it's just one of those intriguing puzzles that
But I mean, it makes you wonder as well about Christianity and how quickly it took and how effectively it took, because in reference in the Orkneyinga Saga, you know where I'm going with this, Sven Brestrop, sitting out at night, conjuring up trolls. So he's sort of conjuring up ghosts to learn magic and black magic from witchcraft. And so when Sven Iversen does him in, Bishop William kind of goes, "Nice one, you know, good boy."
Solved the problem there.
Yeah. But, so, I mean, it might suggest that the old religions were still clinging on and not being eradicated systematically, but being tolerated.
And again, I wonder, you know, it's that difference between bottom up and top down when we think about it. Much of the, you know, the legislation would want you to believe that it's very clean cut and it's just, you know, but what folk are actually doing is very different. And you know, sort of tangentially, but I think it is illustrative of individual interpretation and practice. Is so when you have a parish church and the parish church is dedicated, that becomes the burial place as well. Usually that's what should happen. So people should be buried in the parish kirk. And across Orkney we find that tends to be the case. But in some places that doesn't quite happen like that. And the place I'm thinking of again is Rousey. It happens again. We look to Rousey, but if you think about Rousey, it's different. It has a parish kirk at Westness, where Sigurd was, and a burial ground there. But it also has a burial ground in Worcester, where I was mentioning where these watery kirks were, at Crosskirk. And then it has a peaty burial ground at Scockness, which is another settlement area. And then it has another burial ground at a place called Narston, another settlement area in a different part of the island. And so by rights, by church doctrine, Scockness, Narston and Worcester, they shouldn't have carried on being burial grounds. You know, they should have gone to the parish kirk. And Rousey's a really interesting parish because it's actually two parishes. So you've got Rousey and Egglesey. And the east side of Rousey is part of Egglesey parish. And the rest of Rousey, the west side, is part of Westness. So originally, you know, you've got the two parishes there. And so there should just been a parish kirk in Egglesey and a parish kirk in Rousey, and everybody getting buried there. But for whatever reason, they kept their kind of community burial grounds. And the identity, we've looked at some of the memorials much later on, you know, like 1800s memorialisation. And it's very much the folk in that area that are getting buried in that place. So there seems to be something there that's different from what's expected. And I guess going back to your question then, I think lots of things happen on the ground that we don't kind of book from what's expected. And it's very difficult to find those things. You know,
if you're reading history, then you read about kings and queens and lords and bishops and such like. which was a tiny, tiny section of society, and not representative of what was going on.
No. And I would think too, when you think about the sort of little pilgrimage chapels where folk are continuing to go to right up again until the 1900s. Yeah. Even, for healing and for curative purposes. Again, you're getting that element. Well, that shouldn't really be happening, and yet that maintains, and it's quite a strong tradition in certain areas. So you can see.
A lot of the ministers in the 18th century were, really, really, really annoyed about
They were, and I'm so glad they were, because they tell us about it.
Yeah.
If they hadn't been annoyed, we maybe wouldn't ken about them so much. But
just written a book on folklore of the Orkney Islands for History Press that's coming out next year, and in a chapter called Cure or Kill about charms and traditional healing methods, many of which were utterly disgusting. The chapels, I mean, I've given that a section within the chapter anyway, because of the number of people still going to Damsey and to the Brockenburshy and St Treadwell's and Papa Westry and no doubt numerous others. But people still saw that as being a way of curing ills, which leads you to kind of wonder how the effect that the Reformation had, because, I always kind of thought wrongly, as it turns out, that, it just happened, folk were kind of like, meh, whatever. But the kind of older you get, you realise that this must have been such a traumatic experience where everything that you believed in and everything that you thought was going to bring you good luck and fortune and food has suddenly been swept away, and you're not allowed to do these rituals anymore. You're not allowed to go to these old chapels, these old church sites, and pray for a cure,
And your daily practice is affected by it.
Yeah.
It's not just, I think, because we live in a very secular society, it's sometimes difficult to get your head around who ingrained religious practice was from the moment you were born.
Yeah.
And so, it's a profound effect and impact on everybody. I think, again, we have so little information about this. We don't have written records. We don't even have the written records for the top level, really, for Orkney at this point. And Peter Marshall's done, in his book, The Storm's Edge, he started to look at that, which is fantastic.
On the shelf.
To see one of the pity things that I noticed that I liked was when the bells of St Magnus, when they were damaged and they were sent away to be recast, they recast they asked specifically in the letter that the little symbol of St Magnus be retained and put back on the bell. Now, just a pity thing like that, though, and I'm like, I'm not sure that that's very, Protestant.
Yeah.
But, so the little image of Magnus, the image of the saint is put back on the bell. And I just think that's lovely. There's a sort of sense here that there's things happening that maybe shouldn't have happened, but it was actually written down. So there was enough confidence somewhere that this was going to be allowed to write it down, and for that piece of information to be passed, not verbally, but actually in a written source. Whereas if there had been fear of persecution for doing that, you wouldn't have written it, would you? You would have.
Yeah.
So I think you can look at some of these little snippets that we get that tell us, again, that might be specifically to do with Magnus. I think he has a place. I wrote a song about him with my other hat on, and I said he's inside and outside of time. And I think Magnus has always been that for everybody. Even if you're not one bit interested in Saint Magnus, he's still Earl Magnus, and he's still part of that history. Yeah. So he sort of situates himself as like not in any one place or time. But no, I think you're right. There's lots of things we don't understand, and those Marian dedications. I said, so many of the kirks are Marian, and I don't think it's by coincidence that these are also the places people are going to for help in childbirth and these sorts of things. It's like the reason we know the dedications is partly because that's the dedications that people were still going to. All those kirks we don't have the dedications for. Is that because the saints were no longer needed, or they were not going to, or do you know, so it's telling you a story about even just looking at the dedications we have and think, well, okay, these have been remembered. These church sites we know are there, but we don't know anything about them. Why have they been less well remembered? So we take the evidence and sort of really start to question it in a different way. It tells us a bit too about practice, maybe that's not been recorded by the minister, but you just think, okay, if they ken so much about this one, it must have been remembered and passed down. People must have been going here, you know. So,
well, the unusual one is Dempsey with it again, a St Mary chapel, but that seems to be a way of getting rid of any unwanted children.
Right.
You know, because rather than going there to pray to Mary for to become pregnant or for a safe childbirth, people were going there to get rid of a child that they were pregnant with, believing that if you went to the island, you would lose the child, because they said no women on the island could carry a child full term. It's a weird paradox.
It is. Yeah, I know. Yeah. I think the other one, I mean, I imagine you will have covered it in your book too. We're getting close into sort of witchcraft trials here. I'm sensing them on the side here as we're speaking. And again, I've used these sources to help me understand the church, which is, you know, and use them for archaeological evidence for things, which sounds a bit odd, but, you know, these trials, and not to belittle them in any way, but the descriptions within them are often of ordinary folks' houses. So, for instance, if you want to ken what like a house was in 1640 in Orkney, you get a description in the Bushy case, you know, for the witchcraft trials there, because there's lots of detail in the bedroom and the items in the household. So, as a historical archaeologist, that's something that you can use to actually understand things. But also Corskirk and Rousey again, you know, that it gets mentioned because, and I'm sure, is it Catherine Grieve? I'm trying to remember which lady it is, but she advises the person to go and pray in the corners of the kirkyard, but to go round the church. And so we know that in 1640 the church was standing there. You know, it's that kind of sort of incidental information we're getting. But again, that's very much connected with Christianity, and yet it's a healing and an invocation for health and cure. And it also involves going to the loch. So you've got that connection between that kind of more Iron Agey, you know, water ritual type elements alongside these religious, more Christian, contained in holy space rituals. And I think that layering is something we see in Orkney so much, you know, right from standing stones right through, you get that kind of, I don't know, synergy through time of special places without going too kind of.
Well, I mean, just on the road in Finstone going out to Rendell, there's a broch mound by the side of the road. It's got a World War II pillbox on top of it.
Yes, yeah.
So it's like fortification there, fortification on top. I love that kind of the continuity.
Yeah.
When I was writing the chapter on, because of course it's a chapter on witchcraft and on, I thought I didn't dwell too much on the trials because they've been well covered.
They have, yeah.
So I was, but then looking at the fact that it didn't end there, that it carried on into the 20th century, and who knows, there's probably still somebody that's looking askance at a neighbour and thinking, which, you know, who knows.
My grandmother, Bessie Skay, or Bessie Grieve,
better known as Countrywoman.
Better known as Countrywoman, yeah. She's a writer. But she told me when I was quite pretty, as well as reading me sagas, she also said to me, she says, if I had been born years ago, she says, I would have been tried as a witch. And I remember being terrified and thinking, you know, this was terrible that my granny would have, you know, but she said to me, it's because I ken all about the plants and the flowers and all, and she was incredibly knowledgeable about nature. And it was one of the things she wrote about, all her plants and identifying flowers. She was in the field club, but she knew lots of curative properties for things. And I suppose she was quite right that she probably would have been one of these ones that folk would have looked at and said, because folk would have also gone to her maybe for a cure. I think she was very much aware of being in a tradition of folk that
wise women.
Yeah. And I guess, like you say, it doesn't really end, does it? It's just, thankfully.
The chapter on witchcraft and the cure or kill one is so, I knew it, but when you were so involved, looking into something so deeply and thinking about it so much, I thought, all of these cures, that could have been reason enough to be accused of being a witch. And many of them involved religious texts, like an unrecorded miracle of Jesus that wasn't in the New Testament, was written on a slip of paper and put in a little bag around a girl's neck to cure toothache. Okay. And, but of course, where this is going, it's like, well, I can't hurt to read it, because it's like, never ever read it. Don't ever read it, or else the cure's gone. And of course, curiosity got better, took it out, read it, toothache immediately began again. But it's just, the whole thing of creating ritual, around a cure is something that would have got you into a lot of trouble. It's quite incredible. Just before we kind of go off and veer into song, I just want to ask about Rogvald or Ronald. I mean, he's got his dual name. He was made a saint, but there seems to be no record of him actually being made a saint. But it says in Orkneyinga Saga, Bishop Bjarni had him made a saint in 1192.
It does, yeah.
And that's all it says, but it's just like, many miracles happened, and God showed that he was worthy of being a saint. And
I think Barbara Crawford suggested, and it makes perfect sense to me, that, his reason for being made a saint was very different from Magnus's. It was because of his building of the cathedral. It was because of the Christian things he had done in his life, and what he had done to promote St. Magnus made him a saint. So it's a very different kind of sanctification.
Yeah.
I haven't looked into it in a lot of detail. There ought to be, though, a canonization record by the time that Ronald's made a saint, because you can no longer make someone a saint without papal approval. Whereas when Magnus is made a saint, bishops can make saints themselves. So Bishop William was perfectly right to be able to prove that Magnus was a saint. And I do think they probably took a bit of Magnus with them when they went off to Rome. Because they visit, they go to Rome, and I think part of that journey that's never mentioned in the saga, because they're talking about crusades and, Ermengarde, and they get distracted. But I do wonder if they actually took a relic with them, because that would have been the right thing to do at that point. But if you've got this saint, you're going to take part of your saint to Rome. Sorry, I've digressed completely there. But but with Ronald, there ought to be an actual papal record, and I haven't looked to see.
Well, I've been told that there hasn't been one that's been found, but I mean, I don't know. I haven't been looking for it, and I don't spend much time in the archives of the Vatican, funnily enough.
No, and somebody should. I think probably. I often wonder what is there that's not been catalogued or recognised, because really, for the Orkney being part of the Archdiocese of Nidaros, but only from 1152/3, and prior to that we're part of Lund and Bremen, so there should be church records for all of this time somewhere, and it's not impossible to think that they were centralised, that Orkney didn't keep all its own records, but they were transported. And we have nothing left of the cathedral records in Orkney. And part of me just hopes that that's because some of the records were taken to one of the archdioceses and then went to the Rome, and so that there's some record somewhere in the Vatican in a box that's never been opened for hundreds of years that will have all these things that we want to kind of for Orkney, because the record from 1247, the papal the record of the organisation of the cathedral that we have, well, that was found in the Vatican. So and that is our document. That's our earliest understanding of the administration of the cathedral. So if that was fun too, there must be more. But again, how do you even begin? Even if it was catalogued, what do you keyword search? Is it Orkney? Is it Nidaros? Is it, what are you looking for? What would be your route in, I guess? But I'm always hopeful that there'll be something and somebody will find it in the future and change everything we've ever said. It'll all be turned on its head.
You see, I'm an old romantic / idiot. And I would absolutely love if someday somebody in the cathedral was to go knock on a pillar again and go, "Oh, that's hollow," and in it would be the cathedral library.
Oh yes,
and also maybe papers as well. That would be fabulous, because we know that when the King Haakon IV, King Haakon the Old, as he was known, was dying in the bishop's palace, he was having the lives of saints read to him in Latin, and he got tired of that because he had to do the translation in his head, and he wasn't well. So he had them read the sagas of the kings of Norway to him, his ancestors, from Halfdan the Black, and of course the irony of that is that basically that is Heimskringla. That is Snorri's history of the kings of Norway. And the irony, of course, is that Haakon had him killed in 1241. So, it's like, and then he's reading, he's sitting there listening to the work of the guy that he ordered the murder of. It's that kind of, the irony. But that would suggest that there was a copy of Heimskringla in the cathedral.
Yeah.
As well as who knows what. It's been suggested the historian Norwegia as well could be.
That's right.
There's another one. So someday,
I know,
somebody will go, "Oh, I never noticed that door there before." In it, there's a treasure. Yeah,
well, the cathedral should have had a crypt, shouldn't it? Have they, is it somewhere else? Is that maybe what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Daydream.
Yes. Yeah. To completely change the subject, just for a brief bit anyway, like a wee bit of a yarn about the Orkney, the Big Song project, and your work in researching traditional songs, and not so traditional as well. Of course, there was some quite more modern ones that you were looking at as well. What started that? I know that you've always sang, and you and your sister Emma sing beautifully together as well. And you also write amazing songs as well. But just the song project, the history of Orkney song.
Yeah, so it came about kind of serendipitously. I can't say that word.
Serendipitously.
See, you can't say it now. I've smit you. There we go.
Hello, friends. Just a reminder of how you can support our heritage work and help it to continue. Subscribing, comments, and positive reviews from wherever you listen will help other listeners to find us too. And sharing the podcast on social media is always helpful. You might also consider purchasing Orkneyology Press books and products from our Orkneyology.com website, which is also where you can find the show notes for this podcast. All of these are a great help. And if you're able, you might consider buying us an occasional dram. This is from our Ko-fi page, and you can find it at ko-fi.com/Orkneyology. We really appreciate your encouragement in any way you give it, even if it's just sending warm thoughts our way. Thank you so much. Enjoy the podcast.
So I guess we to go backwards a pretty bit. Yes, I've sung for years and years, and I sang and I learned me singing for my mum. And there was always a kind of sense that in Orkney, the fiddle tunes and music was a really strong element of Orkney culture, as you know, and lots and lots of tunes, and Orkney Folk Festival, which kind of was the conduit in the outside world kind of about that from when it began.
And of course, you're very, very heavily involved with that. And
I have been, yeah, over the years, in lots of different ways.
Husband's the director.
He was the director, until he was for 15 years. He was the director. So yes,
I thought he still was.
No, not anymore. But yes, he stood back. He escaped. He's still on the committee. He's still on the committee, still doing bits, but not directing anymore. But yeah, so I've been involved in it for years. I started singing in the festival when I was sort of 5 or 6 with Mum. So a long time. Yeah. And there was often a question, is there no Orkney songs? There's hardly any Orkney songs. And so at that point, Mum, who had sung a whole variety of songs, different genres at variety concerts in Orkney that used to be a big thing, and she started to make an effort to sing Orkney songs because folk were asking for them. They said, is there none? And she says, oh yes, there is, but we tend not to sing them, kind of thing. And then her and Billy Jolly, who was also an incredible singer, storyteller, musician, everything, wonderful Billy, were the two folk at the beginning really that were singing Orkney songs a lot in the sort of traditional sense. So I grew up kind of kenning that it was really important to be a tradition bearer because you need to carry these songs on and you need to let folk know they exist or else they disappear, like anything. And so that was just happening in life generally in the background. And then when I moved back to Orkney after university, I met up with Amy Leonard, who'd also moved back to Orkney, and she is another fantastic musician and singer and a cousin.
All right. Just as a little aside to that, she was Ermengarde to my Rothwald.
I know.
During a play written by George Mackay Brown for the 800th anniversary of the death of Rothwald.
Yeah.
No, it was the 850th anniversary. It would have been.
Yeah.
Which I got completely suckered into. I was meant to be like historical advisor, and then I ended up being
these things happen.
I know.
They do.
So,
yes.
But anyway,
sorry. So Amy and I got together. Amy was
Ermengarde.
Yes. She was running a choir in Stromness, and I went along because I was wanting to sing, and me and my mum went along together. And then the choir was asked to sing at the folk festival, and I said to Amy, we need to do an Orkney song. And Amy went, yeah, we really need to do an Orkney song. And we were like, what Orkney song could we do? And then we were like, we really need to do more about Orkney songs. And so basically we just sort of said, there's not enough at the moment about Orkney songs. And like Ivan Drever did a really good collection of Orkney songs that he brought together and published. I think maybe in the 80s or 90s or so. But, the big Orkney Song Project was really a response to the Orkney Traditional Music Project, which had been set up in order to promote music and Orkney tunes and to help teach kids and anybody else that wanted to learn to play these traditional tunes, and so that they would keep going. And so in a way we wanted to do something similar with song, but first of all we really had to ken if there was anything to use to do this, because we weren't at the same stage. So we got a lottery fund. We applied to the lottery and got a grant, and the idea was that we were going to collect as many Orkney songs as we could. We would pick some of them and we would teach them back to anybody that wanted to learn them in the community. And it was just to raise awareness of the songs and to create a sort of a library of Orkney songs, so that folk that wanted a song, and ideally in education, in primary schools, if somebody's doing a project on farming, don't be using Old MacDonald Had a Farm, be using an Orkney song about farming, so it was to kind of make sure folk had the resources to draw on if they wanted them.
Our lives was to head a farm.
Yes, exactly. So we had it was a two-year project, and it was myself and Amy and Emily Turton, Emily Wade now, that co-directed that project. And it was fantastic, actually. I absolutely loved it. We were all just part-time doing this, and we get round the islands as much as we could in parishes, and we had what we called song shares. And the idea was that we just had a day in the community hall, and we asked folk to tack any songs that they had in the loft, or if they had a song that they knew, we would record them singing it if they wanted. And beforehand, I was diving away in the Orkney archives to try and find a song for that area that was in the archive collections, and then Amy would rework it for 3-part harmony, because the three of us sing in the trio. And then we'd gather in songs, and then we would teach this song that we had found in the archive, and then we'd have a PD concert, which was all with Orkney song at its front, so that was the idea. It was just to kind of, because there's so many folk that knew nothing about Orkney song in the place they came from, and yet there was other folk in the areas that had been there for generations and came with a bag, bits and pieces, that their granny had or whatever. So that was what we did, and looking back now, it was actually quite a busy time. I had my daughter Josie learned to walk at one of our song shares. She took her first steps in South Ronaldsay. So she was, we had all kids around us, and it was a fantastic environment because we invited everybody in. Yeah. But I was completely blown away by what I found, I think. And that was partly due to just my lack of awareness of what was there. But I went into the Orkney Library and Archive, which, of course, I worked in, so I had a fair idea what was in there because I'd spent time there. But the sound collections there, those collected by Anne Marwick, and then also those that have come from the School of Scottish Studies in Edinburgh, mostly the fieldwork of Alan Bruford. Yeah. And he was doing field recordings in Orkney in the 1960s. Peter Kennedy also did recordings in the 50s. And then we have Anne in the 80s. So you have Ernest Marwick, who wasn't necessarily collecting song, but he was collecting a huge amount more than song, but sometimes that too. So we have this record of songs, and I was going into them and listening to the songs and transcribing them if they weren't transcribed. And that was kind of the core to begin with. And then we made a trip to London to Cecil Sharp House to access Peter Kennedy's recordings because they're not in Orkney. So that's where his recordings are archived. So we managed to get some of those so that they're now in Kirkwall as well. And then we taught a lot of the songs, and we ran the War Choir, and War Choir became increasingly Orkney focused as we got more material, which was lovely. And we got over 1,000 songs. Wow. It was absolutely far more than we imagined, and for that reason, a number of the archive boxes are still in my study at home, being catalogued as and when I can find the time, because there was so much stuff. But it was just a really good way to be able to see the breadth of the songs. Yeah. And for me, with the sort of historical angle, I was particularly interested, as I say, about what it tells us about folk and movement of people and ideas. And we then, as a kind of element of the project, after it, I was able to get funding to produce a book called Voices in Chorus. Yep. And it was just a few of the songs that we had reworked and taught in the parishes and islands that we published with this story. So I created song biographies, because I was using my archaeologist hat. So I was basically doing object biographies, but I just did it for a song. So, here's where we found the song. What happened to it before it came to us? Who did it get to us? Can we find that out? Why did it get to us? And then all of these things to piece together to try and understand who these songs are moving around. Because so many of the songs we collected, they're mainly 19th century. Okay, because it's the people who were recorded, were asked about old songs. So they're singing the songs that they had remembered their grandparents would be singing. So it goes back a bit further sometimes, but in the past tended the collectors wanted to find the oldest. It's a bit like historians and archaeologists. So, let's find the early things. I'm like, no. Let's find the things for new as well. They're as important because someday they're going to be old. And new's when you've got most information, which is, doesn't often happen like that. But anyway, so they were collecting lots of kind of snippets of ancient songs, and there's only a very few that survive in Orkney for reasons we can speak about. And then lots of songs that were sort of 1750s up to the end of the 1800s. But that's a window on life at that time, which is a really fascinating time in our history. It's a very mobile time in our history. Folk are moving and expanding out in all directions and coming back. And songs tell us about that. So that was kind of the purpose of the book, was to look at different genres of song that were telling us about that. So it kind of different elements that I picked up in the songs as we looked at them. and then tried to make a pretty bit of a story of that for somebody coming for the outside to learn a bit about what our songs tell us.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember passing on about information to you from my brother, because he'd had it on Radio Orkney, and the Bride's Lament was mentioned, and he remembered our great aunt who lived with us when I was PD, singing that to him when she was, when he was a PD boy. He was born in 1945, so when he was a kid, sitting on her knee when my parents were out at the fire, that's her, Mrs. McLeod, Yaya, as we know her, which I found later was an Indian word meaning nanny.
Okay.
Yaya. But it's probably got nothing to do with it. She lived in Australia for a while.
Yeah.
Her husband, well, her boyfriend, her fiancé, moved out there to the gold rush, and she married him in New South Wales, in Brisbane. Anyway, she sang him that song, and so that was passed that on.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's actually a really lovely song to illustrate some of the things we were finding with the project. Mm-hmm. So the song, when I was just listening to the recordings, I was instantly drawn to it because it mentions something very unusual for songs. Mm-hmm. Mermaids.
Yeah.
And Orkney doesn't have all that many songs with otherworldly beings in them, as compared to some other places. So I was like, oh, this is a song about mermaids. How interesting. Where has this song come from? Why are they singing this song about mermaids? And like many of our songs, it's sad, and it's about death at sea. And that's completely unsurprising. And I think one of the main things that I learned, or that the songs consolidated in my mind, was the power of the songs to be a sort of cathartic healing or community sharing in loss, because it's amazing how many of the songs are about sea disasters from other places, and it's almost like if you sing about a disaster at sea, either in an unmentioned place or say off Wales or somewhere like that, it's like everybody shares in that community grief of what that can mean, but it's a step away for the rawness that it could have been, as particularly at the times that these songs were being sung, where there was, lots of people were moving about by boat, and so there were many more losses at sea. But this one, as I say, sad, beautiful song, and I was like, where on earth has this come from? Because it was for the singing of Sydney Scott in Orkneyology that I heard it. Okay. And I was like, what was he heard this song? And then doing a bit of investigation and in speaking to his son, I was able to learn that there were records that were sent back and forth from Canada to Orkneyology with family that had gone out to Canada, and they shared records. And so the song, he'd actually learned it for a record, a recording of a record that came from Canada. And then when you contacted me, and and it had a connection with somebody from Australia, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. It's really showing you the diaspora and the song connections. And I mean, it's really fascinating. And when Amy was looking to try and rework it, she often would, look up other versions of songs too. And she found a bluegrass version of it that was really fast. And it was amazing, but completely different. So they'd taken the same recording and taking it in a completely different direction, and yet the version in Orkney became kind of slower and more melodic and sort of sadder. So again, it tells you a little bit about the way folk felt about it here, do you know, and the way they were expressing things. So it's just one of these songs, I think, and because it mentioned mermaids, it's quite interesting because there's so very few that we have that kind of talk about that. And I was interested in getting the whole stretch of songs. Of course, I'm interested in old songs because, I mean, part of what, as we've been speaking about for the last while, I'm really interested in the past. But I was also really keen to collect more recent things. And so a number of the things we broadened our collection out for was, local WIs used to write songs to entertain each other, and for competitions. But what they are they're lovely snippets of social history. So they'll maybe mention a local shop or an event, and that doesn't happen any longer. And so these songs are transient, and I don't think we should preserve them longer than they need to be. They are transient, and they will come and go. But I think we should have a record of them for their time, so that time is remembered. It doesn't have to keep being sung, because I think a lot of the the songs that are remembered, or the songs that the old songs that people keep singing, tend to not be very funny. If you ever noticed that, they tend to be quite poignant. A lot of these, and I think it's because humour is more temporal. So what's funny is often situated in a context, and over time that shifts. So then it's not funny anymore because you have to explain the whole song before you sing it to get the joke, you know? So it's like funny songs have shorter lives generally than the sad songs or the ballads that tell a story in themselves that will still resonate. And if there's still some connection to that song, like the Selkie, then it will live on, and it will shift and it will change and it will adapt, but it will live on as long as folk are interested in the content. Whereas, your funny joke about, you know, something, even with some of the Stone, there's a singer, it's a songwriter called Ali Winnick who wrote lots of songs, and my mum sung a lot of these, and Billy Jolly, and he wrote a song called Picky by the Sea, and it's a song about when there was a rubbish dump near in Kirkwall, and it's a very funny song, but it's almost new at the end of its life too, because most folk don't know that there used to be a rubbish dump there. You know, we're getting to the generational shift. And I think that's quite interesting, because I'm getting to the age now where I'm part of noticing these shifts, you know, whereas I'm getting old.
I remember the dump at Picky, but I mean, just when I was very, very peedy, but everything got chucked in there. I mean, all the household waste got chucked in there, but the you know, guts and all from animals from the slaughterhouse, and the fish bones and guts got dumped in there. There was rats the size of terriers and conger eels as well. I mean, it was a horrible, stinking place.
Surplus rats, according to the song Surplus
Cats.
Oh, was it Surplus Cats? Yeah.
Sack and shrouded surplus cats. Yeah. Because it would have been a place that people would have gone down to drowned unwanted kittens. You know? So not something that would be, you know, welcomed in this day and age.
No,
possibly,
not at all.
But it's what happened.
But you know, it's like the songs of Ali. So that song will disappear, you know, and there's other songs in his repertoire that have already disappeared just because they can't really be sung anymore. And yet he wrote Lonely Scapa Flow. That song will carry on. Now, it's a slower, sadder song, but it has a longer life because of its content, you see. So you can see how the historical record of songs is skewed towards that kind of material, and that was something I hadn't really fully realised until I was working among the songs. And I was like, it's not that Orcadians were just miserable and only sang sad songs. It's just that these are the ones that keep coming through. Yeah.
I got to ask about the great Selkie, So Scary. I mean, it's what a song.
Yeah. And
what a story behind it as well. I mean, it's been, you know, I mean, the tune that everybody is familiar with was written by an academic in a university in America in the 50s. Not realising that there was actually an original tune had been recorded in the 30s in Flotta for Jock Sigler. And I was writing all this up again in the folklore book, so it's fresh in my memory. But you reckon that was, you know, a song that was possibly in Northern originally and had survived the language change to Scots?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've come to, over the years, I'll tell you a bit of my story with the Selkie, because it's kind of interesting and it kind of reflects on a lot of this. When I was younger and competing in the Orkney Folk Festival, because they used to sing in competitions and I really enjoyed doing them, and you had to sing a ballad as one of the things, and so I chose the Selkie So Scary. I was probably 9 or 10 at the time, and the version I knew was Ivan Drever's version, and so I learned it and I sang it. And after I'd done the singing, then the adjudicator said to me, you know, very positive, but said, "Why on earth are you singing a Shetland version of a song that you have a very good Orkney version of?" And I was totally taken aback, for I had no idea. And I was like, "Oh, I thought it was an Orkney song because Ivan sings it," you know. And she was like, No. This is not an Orkney version. There's an Orkney version." And I was really quite upset at the time, because I was like, "Oh, I've done this wrong," and I had no idea.
A horrible thing to do to a 9-year-old, in my opinion. So, shame on you, Chudge, if you're listening.
But Anyway, so I kind of walked away from it because I was really mortified, because I tried really hard to learn it and everything.
Traumatized.
And of course, the version that Ivan sings, I should say, is the Joan Baez known version, so the one. And it's beautiful, and I loved it. And I really connected with the song and the Selkies, and of course, brought up with stories of Selkies and gone, I'm from Harry, so going to the shore to hear seals was really quite exotic. When you're PD, you go to the shore and then hearing these eerie cries of seals. And so there's always been that kind of interest in it. So yes, I was really upset that I'd done something wrong without realising it. So I didn't sing the Selkie again for a long time. And then as an adult, came back into it, interested in song history, and then discovered, in fact, yes, indeed, there was Orkney versions. And I had a lovely conversation with Anne Sinclair from Fair Isle, who sings the Shetland version. And she said to me, she says that even though the words of that, so an earthly Neurus sits and sings, and Aisha sings Balili Wayne, it's in Shetland dialect, that version, but there's certain phrases in it, she said, that are na Shetland. So she says, you don't often speak about the bed feet in Shetland. It's an Orkney term that we would use. And so she said she thought there was definitely connections or influence for Orkney, even in this version that had come for Udst, I think, is the earliest one for Shetland.
Yeah.
But it had this...
Recorded by Captain Thomas.
And it had, I think it has the word bed feet anyway. Anyway, we had this conversation and it made me think I wanted to go and learn a bit more again about the Orkney versions. And as you said, there was these several Orkney versions. And in fact, there's the Flotta one, and then there's the one for South Ronaldsay, or the East Mainland.
Okay.
And Alan Bruford wrote an amazing article on them, really useful article, where he lays them out side by side and pieces together what's missing and similar in both of them. And I do think it's entirely plausible that the song has transcended none, because it's the story we ken is far older. It's not a Scots story. It's not situated in a Scots context. And there is the shift from Norn to Scots is, they would have to do a lot of work to make that happen, but I think the story was important enough that they kept going. And the ballad structure itself, that song that's recorded, is really interesting style. It's in 2 time signatures. That's really unusual. Again, it's suggesting a sort of length of time and history to that tune that could give you that stretch of time. I sing it without any knowledge of time signatures because I learn by ear. I don't read music. But I can tell that it does something at the end of each verse. There's a slight difference in timing that sits in there. So I decided then that I would learn an Orkney version. And because I discovered also that my great granny was Flotta, I went for the Flotta version.
Yeah.
So not only was I learning an Orkney version, I was learning one that my great granny maybe heard sung at the time it was recorded.
Quite.
I decided to go right down as close to my family as I could after being told that I should be looking more close to home. So yeah, and it's a song that I do really like singing. I think it's one of the oldest songs, and I do think there's a really strong argument that it's an Orkney song that's then spread out, whereas a lot of the other songs that we fund in the project are songs for elsewhere that have come to Orkney and they've rooted themselves here and they've adapted and they've stayed and then they've moved. Whereas I think the Selkie is one of these songs that could have started here and then it's moved out and it's rooted itself in other places.
And I believe that the story probably originated for here as well. Can't prove anything, obviously. But that's my gut feeling. But that's another story. But he wouldn't be up for.
Yes, I can give it a try. See if I can mind on all the verses for you.
Well, just whatever.
As many as I can. Let me just take a pretty mouthful.
Do you want a bit of water or glass of water?
No, I think I should be okay, she says. It's funny when you go from speaking to singing. See if I mind it. In Norway lands there lived a maid, Ashbalu Lily this maid began. I know not where my bairn's feather is, whether by land or sea does travel in. It happened on a certain day, when this fair lady lay fast asleep, that in came a good grey Selkie, and he sat him down at her bed feet, saying, awake, my pretty maid, for as soon as thou dost sleep, and I'll tell thee where thy bairn's feather is. He's sitting close at their bed feet. She says, pray come tell to me your name. Come tell me where this thy dwelling be. My name it is Good Hein Mailer, and I earn me living out o' the sea. I am a man upon the land, and am a Selkie in the sea, and when I'm far fae every strand, me dwelling is on Selkie. Alas, alas, this woeful fate, this weary fate that's been laid for me, that a man should come fae the west o'hoy, to the Norway lands to have a bairn wi' me. But I shall wed thee with a ring, my dear, I'll wed thee. Thou may go at the weddings wi' whom thou will, for I'm sure thou'll never wed none wi' me. Then thou shall nurse my peety son for 7 lang years upon your knee, and at the end o' 7 lang years I'll come back and pay thy nourish fee. And she has nursed her peety son for 7 lang years upon her knee, and at the end o' 7 lang years he's come back with gold and white money. She says, I will wed thee with a ring, my dear, I'll wed with thee. Thou may wed thee weddings wi' whom thou will, but I'm sure thou'll never wed none wi' me. For thou will get a gunner good, and a gay good gunner it will be, and he'll go out on a May morning, and he'll shoot the sun and the grey Selkie. And she has gotten a gunner good, and a right good gunner it was he, and he's gone out on a May morning, and he's shot her son and the grey Selkie. Alas, alas, this weary fate, this awful fate that's been laid for me, and in sore twice she sobbed and sighed, and her tender heart did break in 3.
Just fabulous. And a full version.
Yeah,
too.
just about, yeah.
That's amazing. It's just so beautiful. I do love that song. And I actually put that in the book as well. I thought, I need to have a song in here.
Yeah.
So that's in at the end.
It's a really powerful song, I think. You know, I really do. Yeah, I think it's because you can connect to it, and then there's all these conflicts going on in it that you can kind of...
My mother always used to say that I was as soft as shite, and I'm guilty as charged. And you mentioned Anne Sinclair earlier. I did a thing in the Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh with Lisa, her daughter, who sadly died far too young. Yeah. And what a voice that lass had as well. Yeah. It was just, it was wonderful. And she was there to do a couple of songs and to read some more poetry. And then there was other people that were on the bill that kind of wanted to tell this great long story. And I thought, oh, shit, so, but it seemed very important to them. And she said, oh, I'll leave the poetry. And I went, no, you will not. Mm-hmm. You will do your poetry. I'll cut what I was going to do. I mean, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I'll just do like little snippets, anecdote-y things, little things, just to kind of keep it together. And she sang that, and she also sang Bride's Lament. Mm. And on both occasions, I had to get up and introduce the next person. And I had bloody tears in it. Like, so, yeah, I mean, they do stir emotions.
They do, yeah. And it's funny because the Bride's Lament, I was with Lisa and Anne and sang the Bride's Lament, and they heard it and they loved it. And then they sang it, and also like Brian Cromarty he loved it, and then Saltfish 40 have recorded a version of that too. Yeah. So you can see and it was sitting in the archives on a reel to reel, and nobody's heard it for such a long time. And then that's like, of anything, that's what I'm most proud of, or the kind of work that I've done is that's just coming back to life. And yeah,
my mother used to sing quite a bit when I was PD, and I'd completely forgotten, and the one thing that she used to sing was Andrew Ross, Orkney Sailor, which is this, it's a song, it's a true story about an Orkney sailor who was a very devout Christian and the captain of a sailing ship, there's various versions. The one says he was Catholic and hated Protestants, Presbyterians. The other one was that he was an atheist. So, I mean, but you can see that you could get prejudice coming in here, because it was like, well, he was a Catholic, what do you expect,
Yeah.
Or he was an atheist, what do you expect? But he tortured the guy, and did the most horrendous things to him until eventually he died. And he was reported by the crew, who were horrified, when they landed in Liverpool, and he was tried and executed for murder. So my mother used to sing this song. It was like, it was kind of like getting battered in the side of the head, because it was just so awful. Yeah.
But it's part of that culture, actually, the song culture, where people used to write songs about, court cases. I mean, a lot of the broadside ballads are coming out of that, that the paper would publish a song, that people would then, it's kind of part of the news in a way.
Yeah.
That song is in the collection that people have sung it too. In the past, we chose not to sing that song. It's too graphic to sing in a family situation, and it wasn't one. I think quite a lot of folk already know that one. As well. It's, as you say, it's still kind of sung about. Interestingly, did you know it's sung in Canada?
No.
So another one of these connections. So at the folk festival many years ago, there was a singing duo that came, Jim Payne and Fergus O'Byrne. And Jim Payne is from Prince Edward Island. And he and Fergus sang together and apart. So they did their own things as well. And Fergus said, I'm going to sing this song about a sailor. And I was like, and I can't remember now whether he said it was an Orkney sailor, but it was called Andrew Rose. So it had crossed, and the name had shifted from Ross to Rose. But it was almost the exact ballad.
Not an Ontario sailor.
No, it was not an Ontario sailor. So yeah, but it had crossed over. And of course, I suppose it's that distance thing. Nobody knew that was a real person, or whether that was a real story. So you can sing it there probably better than singing it in the community where the person came from. But I did find a newspaper cutting about the trial of the captain. Yeah, so it's in the archive, but it didn't make it into the book. But it's...
Yeah, I somewhere in this house, I hope, I have the lyrics of that written out by my mother.
Okay, yeah.
Because there is paperwork that I can't find.
Oh, okay.
And it would have come here from moving for Kirkwall 12 years ago. It's probably in a cupboard off the sitting room. But I've always been intending to get stuck into that room, empty it out and find out what's there. Because, there was an entire chest set I couldn't find for years. a replica of the Lewis chest set.
Okay.
So not a small thing.
No.
So I eventually found that after about 6 years or something like that. So
I have a long list of to-dos as well. To be honest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The one other song which I was interested in was the New Year song, which I've also put in. It's the last piece in that folklore book because it's the calendar customs. And it's like I put it in for Hogmanay.
Yeah.
Because it did go around on Hogmanay. And it says in it, like, this is all good, New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
So it's Hogmanay. But it was sung on New Year's Day as well, but New Year's song. But could you just tell folk that haven't had a clue about it, as to what it was about?
Yeah, so it's a blessing on your house and your health at the New Year. So it's a very kind of typical thing that you might have found happening long ago. The Orkney version, again, it's like a lot of the songs we've spoken about. This one is very much rooted in Orkney. It's in dialect. Its landscape is Orkney, if you think about when you hear the words. But it's a song that you find in lots of different places. You find it in the north of England, you find it in Scotland, and it's as I say, it's a blessing song. It's got a long history, and some of the Orkney versions are tied in with a medieval ballad. So it suggests it again goes right back, but we can't quite reconcile that with that dialect shift. Right. So we have to think carefully about dialect shifts and what that means, and often, is it really as old as the 12th century? I wouldn't like to say it was, but
King Henry,
Osmond
is
that's
his
right.
mistress.
Yeah, and it sounds to me more like there's a kind of mix up somewhere.
Yeah.
Some people like to join songs together and complete things, and you make your own version, and so that's completely natural. And I think what I would say is you're seeing songs being merged and kind of the originals being forgotten, and then it moving on for that in certain instances of it. But the Northronnell version is not, it doesn't have any of this merging, and it's the one that's something like 82 verses in total. And it goes along with a tradition. And again, I think this is partly why it exists and keeps existing. So like the Selkie, it goes along with other stories about Selkies, and we still call seals Selkies. So it has that connection. The New Year's song goes about with a tradition, first footing. It's basically the song, if you were first footing, you would sing this song. It's kind of, they go together. Our time in Orkney, though, as far as I can, it's hardly done anywhere anymore, but it is sung in Bury. But it shifted for Hogmanay and New Year's Day to Halloween. And they changed the words. So they do a kind of blessing, but instead of wanting food and drink, they want money, which is more reflective of the time. So it sort of ends with money. Right. But they do still go around and sing a version of it. But is directly linked to these much older versions. So you can see how it's not only shifted through time, the words have changed, which we often know, but even the festival has changed through time. So it just shows you that a song how much it can adapt.
Wonder if you'd be able to give us a little sample of that.
I can give you a pretty bit of it. It's a bit monotonous when it's just a single voice, but you'll get the gist of it, I think. I've got the words here in front of me because I've not sung it for a pretty while, but let's give it a go. So this is the version we did with the Song Project, and I took I made a composite version of it. So I'm deliberately not one place over another because I think it's important to be fair. But it's mostly the Northronnell version I took for that. I wanted to use it to show folk the dialect, examples of dialects. We were teaching lots of non-Orcadian speakers. So it's a really good song to teach folk some old Orkney words that we don't use anymore and existing Orkney words. And it hopefully tucks you through the idea of what the song is. So if I can mind it. It does have a chorus, Tom.
I'll spare our listener that.
And I should say actually, yeah, the version. So this version is "We Are All St. Mary's Men." So, and that again takes it back to its pre-Reformation roots. It's definitely a very old song in its origin. Other versions in Orkney, it becomes Queen Mary.
That's the one that I use, but I explain.
Explain what it is. So is that the Stromness version, by any chance? There's a lovely version for Stromness that had Queen Mary's Men in it.
This was for Gory Summers and Winters.
I think that maybe is.
So,
but there's lots of versions again. That's another thing for understanding how long a song's been in a community. The fact that we've got different versions for many parishes and islands suggests this was widely sung across Orkney at some point.
What I'm going to do is I'm just going to wind that clock forward. Because
it's going to chime. And it might chime out of tune. Oh, dear. Piss be to the spurly begin, we are all St. Mary's men, fae the steeth unto the rigging, and that's a forward lady. This is good New Year's Even's night, we are all St. Mary's men, and we've come here to sport and play, and that's a forward lady. The hen was toos that we came from, we are all St. Mary's men, we got odd cakes and sow and scones, the three-legged cog was standing foo, we hopped to get the Sam for you, and that's a forward lady. Good wife, get to your gilling vat, we are all St. Mary's men, and let us drink till warlugs crack, and fetch us in, and fetch us twa, and I the merrier will gang awa, and that's a forward lady. Good wife, get to your kebbuck's creel, we are all St. Mary's men, and see do cunt the kebbuck's wheel, and that's a forward lady. Good wife, get to your butter ark, we are a St. Mary's men, and fetch us here 10 bismer mark, see that ye grip wheel in the dark, and that's a forward lady. May all your mares be will to full, we are a St. Mary's men, and every in be a stake full, and that's a forward lady. May all your kye be will to calf, we are a St. Mary's men, and every in a whayu calf, and that's a forward lady. May all your yows be will in lamb, we are a St. Mary's men, and every in a yow and a ram, and that's a forward lady. May all your hens run in a reel, we are a St. Mary's men, and every in Twalatter hill, and that's a forward lady. Here we hae brought Orcadian horse, we are a St. Mary's men, and many a cush light on his cosh. He'll eat mere meat than we can get, he'll drink mere drink than we can swink, and that's a forward lady.
So basically they're asking for cheese and butter and ale and
oat cakes, sow and scones, and they ask for them all. They all go in the back of the Casey or the straw basket, but one of them has on their back. So that's the carrion horse the last verse. So he's putting everything in the carrion.
Kind of like the fool.
Yeah, but he's also getting a chance to eat it as he goes along because he's carrying it. So that's why he can eat more and everything anybody. And in return for getting this meat, they then bless all the animals in the farm. So that's why you get all of the animals. And it's a fertility rite, isn't it? It's wanting them all to have lots of babies of different kinds.
The quail calf is a female calf.
That's right.
And the stag, the foal stag is a stallion. Yeah. Because they had a thing against mares.
Yeah.
And yet it's like, well, where the hell does the horses come from? You know? But they used to kill mares at birth, at foal, because they had no use for them, and it was considered a great shame for a man to be seen riding a mare.
Goodness, I didn't get that.
You had to ride a stallion, a stag.
Gosh,
so there was this kind of strange hostility.
Well, they obviously didn't feel the same about sheep, for they were going to have a yow and a ram.
Yeah, that was perfectly fine. So yeah, it's lovely to think of that blessing, folk going around the house at New Year, blessing it and the folk in it, and getting a bit of hospitality as well.
But I mean, it's carried on for a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, it has indeed. Well, Sarah Jane, this has just been such a fabulous yarn. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
I think we've meandered all over the place.
Oh, yeah, but that's what it's all about. You know, it's no case of, well, here's the script and we do this. Then you say that. Nah, it's a chat between pals. Yeah. And it's just been an absolute delight having you here. And thank you so much for giving so much of your time.
Well, thank you so much for asking me. I've loved it. It's been super.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
And until next time, see you, folks.